Good afternoon, good morning, wherever in the world you are, and welcome to the We Can Do It Women movement, where women 60 and wiser step into the spotlight and make the rest of their lives the best of their lives. I'm your host, Debra Morrison, a wealth building expert and champion for extraordinary women just like you. For over 45 years, I've helped women secure their financial futures, and now I'm on a mission to ignite a revolution, showing the world that 60, 70, and beyond, we're not slowing down. We're just getting started. Today's We Can Do It Women Expert interview features retired Major General Tammy Smith. Tammy, welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be with you here today. Thanks.
You bet. Well, I am grateful beyond words, in so much as you were able to fill in for an emergency situation, and I couldn't be happier because you are an esteemed guest and a dear friend of mine, I will say. Tammy comes to us from Oregon, where she was raised in a small little town, Oakland, Oregon. And she is described as a little girl, quiet little girl with long pigtails in a town of less than 1,000 people. And she probably didn't even imagine getting gifts later in her career from international leaders, but she did nothing short of that. She won rabbit raising awards or awards for her raising rabbits as a member of the Future Farmers of America. I was raised on a farm. I got that FFA thing down. And she really never dreamed that she would become a future general. Yeah, you heard me, in the Army. But the public speaking skills she learned through FFA helped her earn promotion after promotion, including to Brigadier General in 2012. And at that time, there were fewer than 100 active duty Army generals total, and only a handful were women. So what a little known fact, I think, to some is that she really loved to write. And so she goes through high school and she decides that she will write, and she applies for and wins the selection of Oregon Future Farmers of America chapter to be its state reporter. And she traveled around the state and conducted leadership camps, and she spoke at FFA chapters, and she really relished that role until one day she's reading her FFA magazine, Future Farmers of America. And tell us what happened, Tammy. Can you hear me, Tammy? Are you frozen?
I was frozen.
Okay. So
I'm
did you hear
back.
my intro that you were reading the FFA magazine, and I wanted you to tell us what happened?
Well, here is what happened is that I was reading my FFA magazine, and in it, and this is back in the 80s, and I know what this group is, so we all know the 80s.
Yes.
And it had a little coupon in the magazine. You remember those? You used to pull
Oh,
them
yes.
out and fill them out and send for free information. And that's what I did. I sent for my free information. And what they sent me back was a 4-year ROTC Reserve Officer Training Corps scholarship that would, if I got it, I could go to any university in the United States that had a ROTC program, so long as I got accepted to that university. So, yeah, I just filled that in, and what I got back was that application.
Amazing. Yeah, the caption, as you recalled me, can't afford college? Let the Army show you how. And later you divulged what you probably thought they were meaning to attract.
This is I thought about this later, is just the fact that Future Farmers of America was mostly young men. There were a few of us women, young women, and this would have been filling out that little card probably about like in 1980 or 1981, and they only allowed young women into FFA in the 70s. And and I thought later they weren't even looking for me, man. They were looking for a young man, and they got me. And and so, but what an opportunity that turned out to be. I just, like many people, is that you've got this, you aspire to go to college, you'd like to, you think that's the thing that's going to change your life, but you just don't come from a family that's college oriented, or has the type of finances that would help you go. And so the Army was the perfect bridging strategy for me to be able to go on and to go to college.
Wow. And it did. And then there was this slight wrinkle. During your freshman year, you realize you're gay.
Yeah.
And it was pretty problematic because we're talking about the era of don't ask, don't tell, which prevented LGBTQ people from openly serving. And I think you mentioned that homosexuality was actually labeled a criminal act.
Yeah. Let's say we're going to call it a problem. Personally, it wasn't. It was like, oh my God, finally the world makes sense. But for the fact that I now had this ROTC scholarship, now this was actually before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So
Yes.
this
I'm
goes
sorry.
farther back
Yes.
in that I was impacted by the policy that had just changed in the Department of Defense. This was about the start of the Reagan administration.
Yes. I'm sorry.
And just prior to that, it would have been a criminal offense, and your being gay would have been handled through the Uniform Code of Military Justice. That had just changed, though, in what the process was in handling those who were identified as homosexuals. It was now changed to be administrative, meaning that a commander didn't have to go through any legal proceedings. They could just, on their own judgment, um, determine that you were homosexual, and they could kick you out less than honorably, just with their authority as a commander. And now this became a problem for me, of course, because I had just gotten an ROTC scholarship, and this
Yes.
discovery about myself came at the same time as this policy changed. And I might
Mm.
not even have known about it, except the University of Oregon took the approach because they had a non-discrimination policy. And the university itself went to ROTC program and said, hey, we're thinking about kicking you guys off of our campus because this new policy, where you actually ask somebody when they're coming into the military about whether or not they've ever engaged in a homosexual act, it was actually on the form that you filled out. Um, that's out of compliance with our EO policy here. And you're going to have to come and stand before the whatever the big council is in a university and explain to
Yes.
us why we shouldn't kick you off of campus. And I ended up, because I was like, there were only two freshmen with a 4-year scholarship, and they asked like one person from each of the classes, so like junior, senior, freshman, and they asked me to write one of those letters. They didn't know I was gay. I mean, I just figured it out, and I wrote the letter to trying to explain why the Army doesn't really discriminate, because they don't ask me whether or not I'm gay. And because I'm an officer and I'm going to be commissioned, I'm not going to fill out one of those enlistment forms. So I'm
Yes.
not really going to have to answer that question. And as long as I'm quiet about it, and so I gave a don't ask, don't tell argument that they taught me how to write. And I look back on that and I think about all the times that we're put in a position to have to make an economic choice that goes against our own authenticity or who we are. But you know what? First and foremost, you got to have a place to live, and
Yes.
you got to eat. And so, just sometimes we come to those things in our life where we've got to make a choice. And I made that choice. If I was going to keep that scholarship and launch myself into whatever it was that was going to get me out of Oakland, Oregon, I wasn't going back to marry a sheep rancher at that point. That I just needed to go ahead and move forward, and just learn how to hide is how I started my college experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's a quote directly from you. I live my life authentically as me, but I did it top secret. I hid my
Tough.
life. This chokes me up. Um, I hid my life from my coworkers, my peers.
Yes,
I did that for 25 years. I
for
just want that
25
to
years.
land on people. 25 years. Quote, still quoting, I was under a policy or a law that said my being identified as homosexual or lesbian was on face value an affront to military service.
Yeah, that's one of the things about this particular policy. So we went and we had the administrative policy um, up until about 1993 or 94.
Yes.
So I experienced that administrative policy, and that administrative policy was kind of bad too, because underneath that policy, it was perfectly okay for criminal investigators to just go out and try and identify those people who were homosexual, and in many cases entrap you. They would do things like they would go to the maybe the local gay bar, and they
Yes.
would go in there and pretend to be a client and maybe offer to buy you a drink. And if you said yes, and they say, hey, I'm with criminal investigation division, we know you are the military, you need to come with us, and in that change, though, in 94, under the don't ask, don't tell, that's when that became a law, but during the whole time, what made it that face value thing is that I wasn't allowed for you to know me. So the stereotypes, they could flourish in
Yes.
that sort of environment that, Smith was a good soldier. People didn't know Smith was gay, and
Yes.
I couldn't let you know so that perhaps maybe I could change a mind in a workplace
Right.
about, just what it meant to be a member of my particular community. And for
Right.
me, that was one of the most horrible things, is that they told you were that way, and then you were not allowed to defend yourself without risk of, again, at that point, it was no longer an economics decision. It was something I really loved, being in the army. It
Yes.
was a job that I loved, and that changed over time. But those two things certainly didn't mesh. Or maybe for the people who were in support of the policy, maybe it meshed just perfectly, that we were put in a position where we could not defend ourselves.
Yeah, I don't know, but I'm just so just riveted by your whole story. So, um, uh, General Smith has really distinguished herself. She got a bachelor's degree in U.S. history, has two master's degree, one in management from the Army War College in strategic studies, and she has a doctorate of management organizational leadership. Now, she was just doing this on the side. Okay, a general overachiever. And yet for her glass ceiling came the potential bars on the windows, right? Because of this policy. So let's rewind a little bit. You were commissioned as a college graduate as
Mhm.
a second lieutenant in the quartermaster corps,
Yeah.
and that was logistics and supplies and fuel and water, and then also the identification and retrieval of deceased military personnel. That had to have been gnarly, just completely
Mhm.
emotional. I mean, how did you do that?
Well, it was at the time that I was young. It was a career field, and within the logistics corps. It was just another one of those skills that you rehearsed and practiced for. In the 80s, we weren't at war, and it was different than having that particular skill and being a young officer, perhaps later during the Iraq and Afghanistan period.
Right.
But early in the 80s, the time of service was just different, because we weren't a nation at war. And so that made also many things about the character of service as I was going through those first years different than
Yes.
what young people experienced, in the 20-year war that we had.
Right, right. And then talk to us, 1987. You could kind of put in, could you not, a request where you'd like to go, and what did you tell them?
Yeah, it was one of those times when we're at the end, we're going to graduate college, we're all going to be lieutenants, we're all really excited. We know whether we're going to be infantry, or my case a quartermaster, or whatever our branch is going to be. And the only thing left now is like, where is our first assignment is going to be. And this was before the internet, so nobody got an email, so you're literally like waiting for a letter to come in the mail with your orders that are going to tell you like where you're going to be. And I wasn't getting my order. Everybody was getting theirs, and mine wasn't coming. And so uh, the ROTC department gave me some secret phone number, to call and talk to the person that does these types of assignments. And they were kind of like, well, we're working for it. We haven't got everybody set yet, but since you're on the phone, where would you like to go? And I said, I don't care really. Just send me someplace warm. And my letter came in the mail, and I opened it up, and I go, look at this, I've got an assignment to Panama. Panama? Where's Panama? And, I have to go to the Globe there in
Yes, of
the
course.
ROTC department to find where Panama was.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you that, it, I mean, the universe has looked out for me so many times in my life, and this was one of them. In just a young person from Oakland, Oregon, having the opportunity to go live overseas and to experience another culture,
Yes,
not as a tourist, but as somebody living there with a salary
absolutely.
and an apartment and all of those things. Um, and again, we weren't a nation at war,
Yes.
and all the things that went with that, and it was just a wonderful maturing growth experience for me, to live in that situation as a young person. And the advice I often give to new lieutenants and people coming into the service, when they because the first thing you think is that, well, I want to be assigned close to home.
Yeah.
Most of the time people are like
Yeah.
that, is, I want to be assigned close to home. It's like, no, you don't. um, Yes, if you get the opportunity, tell them you want to go to Korea, you want to go to Germany, you want to go to Italy here. And there were more choices of overseas during the 80s that I had. But in terms of an enriching experience, I am forever grateful that I told that assignment officer to send me someplace warm.
So good. Then a year later, promoted to first lieutenant. In 1989, you get a Costa Rica deployment. Pretty painful,
Mhm.
right?
Well, painful. It would be painful for me now, but as a 27-year-old, or however old I was, it was perfect. It was during the time that I was assigned in Panama, so that first assignment. And at the time, our nation was still doing these exercises that they called nation building. And a lot of them, because it was the Reagan administration, was in Central and South America. And what the government would do is they would send a military task force to in cooperation. It's all through the State Department and everything that goes through that, in cooperation with these countries. They would send them, and we would do a project. And we went to the southwest part of Costa Rica, because there was the Osa Peninsula that would get
Yes.
detached from the rest of the country during the rainy season, because they didn't have sufficient roads or bridges in that area. And they sent this task force down. It was an engineer task force, and I was responsible for the logistics support detachment. And we built about 27 miles of road, and put in, I don't remember now how many bridges, maybe about 7 bridges, something like that. There were the Bailey bridges, which are kind of like erector set bridges, if you can picture that,
Ah,
like these one
interesting.
lane
Yeah.
lane bridges that you put over an abutment that the engineers built up the dirt. And so it wasn't anything that looks like anything modern, but it was better than what the region had. And we left, and I got to go back there on a cruise, just a civilian cruise in 2012. And of course, the ship stopped at the same peninsula that we had been. And I went, of course, in search of those bridges.
Of course.
And what I found is that over the 20 years since I had been down there, the infrastructure had matured to the place where they had a regular cement bridge over those rivers, and they had a 2-lane paved road down in
Wow.
that area. And when we went there, we literally just they gave us a cow field that was flat, and we set up our tents and put our equipment in there, and that was like our base. And
Wow.
the little town had a dirt road, and we got to go in there once a week, and you drink beer in the little local restaurants and that sort of thing.
Right.
But I was very proud to see that
Yes.
perhaps it was the start of what we did that helped that region mature in that
Oh,
particular way. And and it was the last official. Tracy looked this up. She was so curious about my trip to Costa Rica that she became fascinated by it. Tracy is my wife,
yes,
and
exactly.
she learned, though, that that was actually the last actual name nation building exercise that the United States did. And I look back on it, and it was so good for us as military members, because we actually exercised our skills in a way that was useful, that wasn't just training and we tear it back down.
Yeah.
And we have to have those skills anyway, and we spend money to train in those skills. So
Mm,
you know, I I'm not in the State Department or anything, but from my experience with it as a young person and seeing the world later, I think it was a good program.
Oh, it sounds amazing. Now, in the background, I just want to
Mhm.
update people. Since 1941 to 1949, 1941 through the late 80s, the number of men and women discharged dishonorably as homosexuals or lesbians approached 100,000. Now, in 1990, Tammy is in an Army officer advanced course and 941 LGBT discharges across the military, of which women were 11% of the force, but 21.4% of those discharged. Yikes. Then 1 year later, you're promoted to captain. You had a really meteoritic rise. My hat is off to you, and I know better than to salute to you because that's not my that's not my privilege. But talk to us about then promoting to captain, and then I'm skipping right to 1996 when you became a jump master and a senior parachutist. I just listened to an interview where you were talking about that and it was quite funny. So would you share that with us?
Yeah, so the Army is, of course, a pyramid in terms of how you get promoted. And, at the bottom of that pyramid where it's the widest, you need the most lieutenants, captains, the workers. Um, and in the military, nobody comes in laterally, so you just can't come in as a colonel. I mean, you got to go up those pyramids, and at each level, there's certain expectations that you go through. And my time as a lieutenant and captain, I mean, that's all hands-on work. That's out there helping them move the fuel hoses for the engineer equipment as they're building bridges in Costa Rica. Yeah, that's marching with your drill sergeants as you go out to the rifle range and helping the new trainees clear their weapons. I mean, it's hands-on stuff.
Right.
And one of the things that I did that was hands-on during this time is I had an opportunity when some of the rules changed in the early 90s. It's like they didn't. Um, they were working on don't ask, don't tell, and open service, but they were also trying to expand opportunities for women because we were still limited. We couldn't be in all jobs.
No, I know.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so we were really good at the jobs we were in, but we couldn't be in all jobs, and they were trying to open that up a little bit. And so I had the opportunity to be um, assigned to what's called a combat training center, and that is in the Army. There were three of them, and what that is in a nation not at war. Remember, we're still now in the early 90s.
Right.
Is that it's the most realistic wartime training that units go through, and it's at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And after they lifted that combat exclusion rule, I was a logistics person. I was able to be assigned at a combat training center as a logistics officer, where
Yes.
I the year before women couldn't be just because we were women, but they had logistics officers there. And so, in order to do that, I had to be parachute qualified because my hands on job was going to be that I was going to be operating the drop zone in the training area because part of the realistic training was had to fight their war, but they had to use airdrop resupply in order to fight their war. So it was all the coordination with the Air Force and how to get the stuff off the airfield and all this sort of thing. So I had to go to like learn how to jump out of an airplane in order to be proficient on and to know and to go to a couple other schools so I could be proficient on the drop zone. And while I was doing that, um, I had you do 5 jumps when you're in jump school. Um, and so, it's a very physical school. I went through and I did the 3 weeks. You do your 5 jumps. So to graduate, you have to go through the 3 weeks of training and you got to jump out of the airplane 5 times, which, what's so hard about that, right? You just jump out of the airplane. But
Oh,
what happened to me um, is that the second time I jumped, it was in a 141 aircraft, which is a jet aircraft, and it flies
okay.
a little faster. And it is kind of, and I'm, this is only the second time I jumped, right? And so when you get close to that door on that type of aircraft, it's like when you hold a Kleenex in a little cracked window and it sucks it out. The same thing will happen to your body, and it happened to my body. So I wasn't prepared, and I caught this little chicken wing on the way out, and what that did is, as I got sucked out the aircraft, it caused me to spin, and because I was spinning and not in the right position, canopy release assembly came and hit me right in the mouth, and clean extraction. As I'm waiting for my parachute to open, my suspension lines get twisted all the way to the risers. My head's forced down. I can't see the other jumpers around me. I'm falling at, everybody's the same, but you fall about at 15 feet per second is about the rate that you fall underneath that parachute. It's not one of those little steerable ones. It's those great
Yeah.
big round army ones. And I finally, I thought, okay, I know what to do. They taught me. Reach up there, pull it apart, bicycle your legs. It's going to unspin you. And sure enough, it did, just in time for me to land. And I landed hard, of course, but I was fine. Like I was fine, except I was missing the tooth and I had blood all down the front of me. And I got up and collected my parachute. But I can remember that as I was kind of collecting my parachute and get myself together after all of that, it was kind of like I was comforted because I remembered before we got on the aircraft to jump, the jump masters had said, jumpers, trust your equipment, it will not fail you. And even though I messed up with that little chicken wing and I twisted my suspension lines and my risers, that parachute still opened, and I still essentially got to the ground safely. And has stuck with me through the rest of my career, is the ability to trust your equipment. So I think
Wow.
that's where you wanted me to go with that.
Yeah, what a story. And then you did it the second time and you sailed right through it, no sweat. Congratulations. And oh yeah, that just made my tooth hurt. So then you transitioned in 1996 to the Army Reserve, and
I
you were a
did.
mobilization planner. You were secretary to the General Staff of the 99th Regional Readiness Command in Coriopolis, Pennsylvania. I know exactly
Yeah.
where that is. And then you served on the Army staff as an operation officer in the Office of the Chief of the Army Reserve at the Pentagon.
Mhm.
After which you, 1 year later, promoted to major.
Mhm.
Huge. That is freaking huge. So I think it's huge and I honor you. In 1999, you returned to full-time active duty in the Army Reserve, and yet you're still hiding.
Mhm.
In 2004, you're promoted to lieutenant colonel. You're transferred to a job in the Pentagon, and that October, you meet the woman of your dreams, Tracy Hepner. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, well, I'll get to Tracy, but I want to just, despite the hiding, despite that something bad can happen at work and you don't just get fired, but you get fired and dishonorably discharged, and it's, you get like
Yeah.
a red letter on your shirt. When I got out of active duty, from Fort Polk, I did it because I really thought that I need to go and live my life. I had a partner at the time, and so I thought, I'm going to get out. I'll stay in the reserve, and then I'm just going to live my life. I can't do this anymore. I can't hide. And so I was out, but you know what? I missed the army so much that
Get back in.
if I had a chance to go back in, that I thought I would go back in full time if I had the chance. I really missed it. I missed being around soldiers. I missed the hands-on stuff. I liked that sort of thing. And in '99, there was this opportunity where the Army Reserve, as we were reformatting some things across all the forces, there was opportunity. They were hiring what was called Active Guard and Reserve, and so it was an opportunity to go back onto active duty. And so I miss soldiers enough. And, I told my partner at the time, we talked about it. I said, I'm going to go, and if I get accepted to go back on active duty, we've got to agree I'm not leaving again. You know, um, I'm sticking it out because, you know, I miss soldiers too bad. And so, you know, she didn't last, but the army
There you go.
lasted. So but I really did miss being around soldiers full time and wearing that uniform full time enough that I did that. And so, yeah, I was scooting along and doing all the things that you're supposed to do to go up that pyramid, you know,
Yes.
having the right jobs, working hard, um, loving what I was doing, still having my underground life and hiding my life and not bringing any of that or anything personal to work ever. And yeah, then in 2004, um, even though everything was going so good, it's like I got smacked in the face by something I wasn't expecting, and that was when I met Tracy, you know, and then all of a sudden, it's hard. I didn't think that I would find something that I loved as much or more than the army. And she really like poked me in the nose, you know, in 2004 when I met her. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And boy, it made it hard because, you know, like I say, I loved being in the army. And you know, so we just decided that we would figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And figure it out you did. There you were, 5 years figuring it out. And in 2009, you said, I'm retiring.
Yeah.
I'm retiring. But
Yeah,
talk
it
to
was
us about when you changed your mind, please.
yeah. Yeah, it was so Tracy and I met in 2004 and you know, our relationship it was the right thing. It was what we were supposed to do. And she agreed, you know, that she understood that she would need to be in the closet to be with me. And at this point I was far enough along in my career that like now the goal is not saving my scholarship to get out
Yes.
of college. Now my goal is can I make it to retirement um and be able to do that, you know? So we set our sights on retirement. And then they I have this opportunity too. I keep getting promoted, you know, and I end up being promoted to colonel. And but I'm at this point though, because this is through the period of like 2007, 8, 9, 10, this period, and this is when we did the transition then to the Obama administration. So
Yes.
many of the conversations about open service began to change a little bit. And being with Tracy made it hard because when you love somebody, you want to share them. And so even though we had a great life and we were doing the things that we needed to do, hiding her was made being in the military harder. And then it got even harder when things in the world started to change around me. In 2004, Massachusetts allowed gay marriage in their state. We saw many corporations begin to offer partner benefits because they were trying everything they could to attract best talent. And if that was an extra thing to get somebody on the team, then they were doing things like that.
Right.
You see other nations that are opening up service, but you know, nothing was happening in my military. And
Yeah.
so it got hard. And what it felt like was I had this values conflict. I had
Mm.
this dissonance between what I thought were my personal values and my institutional values. You know, because I love the army. I love that they were about honor and integrity and all of these things that were so important to me. But
Yes.
then I was beginning because I knew there wasn't anything wrong with me.
Of
I,
course.
I mean, I never had that feeling that
Yes.
I wasn't hiding because I was ashamed. I was hiding so I wouldn't lose my job. And I never felt like there was anything wrong with me. So I started to feel like my values were no longer aligned with my institution. And boy, that made it hard. So as you said, what I decided to do is I decided that I needed to retire.
Yeah.
And when I said I got promoted during that time and some things changed that would have allowed me to serve, you know, longer, I just went for the minimum required and I put in my retirement papers to hit that minimum required so that I could retire. Because I was despondent, I was depressed. I was
course.
having a horrible time. You know, Tracy
Yes,
could see it as I left the door every day with my head hanging down. It's like it wasn't a
of
place
course.
I wanted to be in anymore. And so I got my retirement orders, and you know, so we had a retirement date out there in the future. So we were going to hit the goal,
Yeah,
and then I thought maybe as a retiree, there's more I could do to
right,
help and use my voice to move it along. And along the way, during these changes politically, the Senate Armed Services Committee asked the chairman of the Joint Chiefs to come down and to give some testimony and to give his best military advice about the question about open service, whether or not open homosexuals should be allowed to serve in the military.
right.
And this was Admiral um, Mullen was the
Yes, F.
chairman at the
Mullen.
time. And so he went down there and he gave his testimony. And among the things that he said was something, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. He goes, I can't understand personally how we as an institution can be so comfortable with asking our individuals to lie and to violate their own integrity in order to serve our nation.
Yes,
And I saw him say that on C-SPAN, and I cried because nobody currently serving in uniform had ever told me that my service was as honorable as anybody else's. And because he was a senior leader who said that, um, he gave me hope.
yes, of course.
And, Tracy and I talked about it. I said, oh my gosh, if the chairman's going to speak up, maybe there is hope. Maybe this don't ask, don't tell thing, maybe it can go away. Maybe we jumped the gun on this. And so in this weird twist, I went back to my boss who was a one-star general and said, ma'am, maybe I kind of jumped the gun on this retirement thing. I'm wondering, and this is the Army's big bureaucracy. You don't normally get to take anything back
No,
once
you
that
do not.
order is
Yeah.
published. And but I said, maybe would you support me maybe seeing if I can get my retirement order withdrawn? And I do want to serve a little longer. And she was like, of course I'll help you. I thought it was stupid you were going to retire. You're a good officer, man. I'll help you get back to work. And
Okay.
I got my retirement order rescinded. And so because of that, having that hope and this officer who helped rescind that order, I was still in the force then during the time that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was finally repealed. And I was able to continue serving.
Well, and then let me just remind everyone of one of the most deadly theaters was Afghanistan. And the U.S. lost more troops than any country in Afghanistan. And you are still not able to be out. And you are deployed then to do a tour of Afghanistan. And
Yeah.
when
Be
you're,
careful what you ask for, right?
be careful what you ask for. But I just want everyone to wrap your head around this. Your partner is going into the most dangerous theater in the world. And you have to shake her hand like she's your friend. You cannot display that this is your beloved that you might never see again. I can't even fathom how painful that had to be for both of you.
Yeah. Yeah, you look back on some of this stuff and you go, man, that was some crap. And at the time you just do your best to get through it. But it absolutely true statement is that other families, were held in high esteem for their own sacrifice, understanding that their soldier was in a place that was dangerous. And, the community wrapped up those families as they should and made sure that those families were cared for and had emotional support and all of those things while their soldier was away on the deployment into a theater of war. And Tracy had none of that. When I went as an individual augmentee, meaning that I didn't leave directly in a big formation of soldiers directly from the airfield. I first went just by myself down to Fort Benning and then left from there. So Tracy went with me to the civilian airport on my way down to Fort Benning. And, you know, as Deborah's saying, is like we were just had to sit there and drink coffee and pretend like, you know, I was just going on a trip. And it was hard to do.
Meanwhile, Tracy, being the wonderful gal she is, and she is a wonderful gal, I have come to know her and respect her terrifically for so many things. But General Smith is over in Bagram, Afghanistan, when DATT repeal was implemented on September 20th. And Tracy had created the Rainbow Ribbon Project to advocate for an end to this ban. She co-founded Military Partners and Family Coalition, which was a support group for LGBT military partners and their families, which was so sorely needed. And boy, my hat's off to her for coalescing that group of people, because gosh, you needed support just like every other person.
Yeah, well, you know, she is amazing. And but you know, during that time of our decision that okay, maybe I should not retire, and maybe there's some things we should do. You know, we became more involved with the organizations that were working towards repeal in a very underground way.
Of
You know,
course.
I used my knowledge of my own experience. The thing I couldn't tell is that I did things like I wrote talking points and I wrote things for other people to use to tell the story of somebody who was serving. And there came a time then when the Pentagon had put together the comprehensive working group that was doing the study on behalf of the chairman of the Joint Staff to report back to Congress about whether or not it could be repealed, this great big study. And one of the things that they did was they said, well, you know what, we need to talk to some partners. But like, how can you talk to a partner? Because if you know they're a partner, then you know the, and so, but there was this like in the underground, you know, there were these Facebook messages that went back and forth, and
Of
Tracy
course.
ended up with one of these Facebook messages saying, "Hey, we're trying to find some partners who are willing to go to the Pentagon and talk to the comprehensive working group." And she came and she told me about it, and I said, "You should do that." And she's like, "Okay, well, I'll get some of my friends and we can go together." And she talked to her friends, and nobody would go. And then she got scared, like, "Oh gosh, what do they know that I don't know?
Exactly.
Maybe I shouldn't go." And I said, "Tracy, you have to go." And so she ended up being one of 10 who went and spoke to the actual comprehensive working group about, you know, and she said it was kind of like the group wanted to know, like, what are your demands as spouses? Or is they weren't spouses, they were partners. What is it that you want? You think you want to live on post? You think you want health care? What is it you want? And they all wanted the same thing. They said, we want you to take the weight of this off of our soldiers' shoulders. And you know, they said they're like, we haven't thought about what we want. You know, this is not about benefits. This is not about we want our partners to not be like I was when I was so despondent. That's what they asked for in that particular meeting. And then because the 10 had met, they saw they realized that no other group existed like them. And that's what kind of launched this military partner and family coalition, because they realized that if repeal worked, there needed to be a place for families to land. And so they were forward thinking in knowing that you know, the military couldn't because the Defense of Marriage Act was still in place, but
Of
they
course.
wanted an organization for families. And so that was already created before repeal happened. And I'm so proud of her work and her foresight in being able to be part of putting that together.
Absolutely. She just really built the nest into which people could, you know, fall into the nest, if you will, and be encouraged and upheld and revered, frankly, noticed for themselves and their relationships. So talk to us. You're in Bagram, Afghanistan when DATT was repealed.
Yeah.
Uh, what went through your head and heart?
Well, you know, we knew the day, it was, we were waiting for the calendar to turn over. And so September 20th in 2011. And I just, I woke up that day and it was just a different day for me. And I remember that I got up and had my normal routine, and I was walking to Dragon Dining Facility for breakfast. And I was hoping to catch the eye of somebody who was having the same sort of day that I was having.
Yes.
And and there was nothing. I got
No.
nothing.
No.
But it was perfect because it was the 20th, but on the 19th I'd been in Afghanistan and I was still there on the 20th doing my job. We were there the whole time. We were doing the work that needed to be done for our country. And the fact that this was now removed was just the weight off the shoulders,
Uh,
that we didn't have to worry about it anymore. So there wasn't a celebration. There wasn't anything that happened. Nobody cut a cake, nothing like that. We just all independently um,
just
felt that weight being lifted. And I felt no need to come out to anybody, and I didn't, but I didn't worry as much about whether or not anybody, noticed that each of my care packages also had a little card in them that had a heart on
exactly. Exactly. Wow. And then March of 2012, you and Tracy married at the
it.
Jefferson Memorial. How great was that?
Oh, it was something that back in Panama, Costa Rica, I couldn't have imagined that I would ever be able to marry somebody that I loved. You know, it was something I, I guess I'm not visionary enough. I just didn't think that that would be something that would be in my life.
Yeah.
And so when I came back from Afghanistan, like I say, it wasn't about benefits or anything.
Yeah.
Tracy and I could be married because you could be married in DC, and we were living in Arlington, Virginia at the time. And
Yeah.
so we decided that because we could, we wanted to be married. And so we went and we got the license to be married in Washington, DC, and then we had our ceremony at the Jefferson Memorial.
Amazing. So that's March.
Hmm.
May, she learns that she's promoted to Brigadier General. Holy
Yeah.
moly, what an honor by the Secretary of Defense. Gosh.
Yeah, it's crazy. And again, I should have been retired, right? But
Thanks, thanks be to God, and our nation is grateful you weren't.
yeah, yeah. And so I'm notified that I'd been selected for promotion, right? And so how this works is that, the announcement comes out that you get
Yes,
confirmed by the Senate, and the announcement comes out. And there's usually some waiting before your actual promotion, administrative stuff that's irrelevant here, but usually you don't get promoted that same day. It's a few months out.
right.
But I had people asking me in the community because we'd been part of the little underground. Tracy was so involved with Military Partner Family Coalition, so our community, our gay community, knew we were a couple, even if the Army didn't. And so
Yes,
people were asking us, well, what are you going to do? Nobody higher than a colonel has come out yet. There's no flag officer, no general or admiral who's come out. What are you going to do? And Tracy and I, we talked about it, and we decided the right thing to do, our instinct told us, is that we needed to be out, that that promotion ceremony needed to be conducted in a way that she participated as who she was and not as my like friend or roommate
yes,
in that ceremony. And you know and and with that, I would become the first openly gay general in the military. And but there was a lot of thought and angst and fear that went into that decision.
yes,
Even though now I look back on it, it's 10 or 13, like 13 years. It's been a while.
yeah.
That we had to make that decision. And it's thank you, universe, because we made good decisions during that time. And it's going back to trusting your equipment. It
Yeah.
was We were guided by our values seemed congruent with the military again. It seemed like we had come together in a way that was better again. And it just felt like the right thing to do, even though I was frankly terrified. Because, 25 years at that point, and I was really good at hiding. That was my strength. That's some of my success came from my ability to hide. And now I was going to have to reverse that and learn how to be openly gay and really define that. What is openly gay? I was
Yes.
I was gonna have to make this crossover, and I wouldn't even be able to tell you what that means to be openly gay, and but I was gonna have to be that, and
Yes.
but it was the right choice. It was the right thing to do for me as a senior leader in that time period.
Mhm. And we have a number of women in our community that are addressing the second after chapter and so forth of their life, and some of them are scared to death. They don't know how they're going to do it. They maybe wish there were the first 18 steps as to how to do it, but you are witness to you can be scared to death and you can take that judicious action. So you have that fire in your belly and you knew it was the right thing. And in retrospect, you're sure it was the right thing to use your position and your power on behalf of those with lesser rank also. It was a huge statement for you two. And it was also such a leadership move that we're all eternally grateful for because you really changed the conversation.
I'm grateful that I got a lot of respect from my peers for what I did. I don't mean my gay peers, but because it was just me, even though they were there.
Yes,
um,
exactly.
but the and I don't mean that as a dig at all, because we all make our own personal choices, and this is a personal thing about how you approach it, and it was all new then. But I followed my values. I tried to role model, and of course Tracy's completely on board, is that we were a military family that happened to be gay, and not a gay family that happened to be military. And we
Thank you.
led with our military identity, because I love the values, I love the uniform, I wanted to continue to serve. I felt humbled that
Yes.
the Army was going to promote me to be a general,
Yes.
of all things. And I was humbled by that, and I wanted to represent it well. But I didn't want to disrespect that I was married, and I didn't want to role model that you should either be afraid that
Yes.
you have a lifelong commitment to a person of the same sex. I didn't want to role model in any way that you should be ashamed of that or afraid of that,
Right.
moving forward. And so again, it's when you're at these hard places, in as you get older, you are more certain about what your values are.
There you
And
go.
sometimes, even though it is as hard as it might have been when you were younger, you have more tools to guide you. And who knows if I would have been able to do that as a younger person, like I say, because I was just more mature in my own personal understanding of my values and what was important to me.
Wow. Well, truer words haven't been spoken. So you had the promotion ceremony. You actually had two of them. The first one was staged by the 3rd Infantry, U.S. Infantry, known as the Old Guard, oldest active duty infantry unit in the Army, dating back to 1784.
Mhm,
And of course, Tracy Hepner is on one side of you,
mhm.
and your dad is on the other side, and they
Yeah.
both pinned your stars
Mhm.
on your uniform.
Yeah.
The pictures of that, you guys have to go and look it up. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Like I said, and I was so terrified that day.
Of
But
course you were.
obviously I lived,
Well, you
and
both
it
look like, you'd done it 18 times before. I mean, you're cool as a cucumber. It was amazing. One of the participants that day, Andrea Holan, we were in 1980. She was one of the first of 62 women ever to graduate from West Point Army's Academy. And after 12 years on active duty, she pulls back and resigns, and she's not the only person. And so for General Smith, who's with us today, to have, had the tenacity to follow her love for the Army and serving our great country, and then for her girlfriend who became her wife, was astonishing. Tammy's second ceremony was held, and I watched it on YouTube or wherever it was broadcast. The Women in Military Service for America Memorial in Arlington National Cemetery. And
Yeah.
Tracy again pinned the Brigadier General star on Tammy's shoulder. And what is said, the 9-year trajectory of representing people with pride, distinctive in service, and love across America began. In that ceremony, I want to point out Korea's military attaché to the United States, on behalf of the President of the Republic of Korea, presented General Smith with their Order of National Security Cheonsu Medal, the highest honor they bestow upon generals. That had to have been a proud moment.
It was wonderful, and that was actually my retirement ceremony.
Oh, pardon me. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries on that. I had the opportunity at that point to serve nearly 10 years as a general, and so the award from the Republic of Korea was a result of one of my assignments. My first assignment as a 2-star was actually in the Republic of Korea as the deputy commanding general for logistics at 8th Army, and I was the first woman to be assigned to the 8th Army headquarters, and they have been on the peninsula since the Korean War. That headquarters has been there, and instead of I was the first woman, instead of a husband, I brought a wife, and so it was quite the experience there in Korea also. But again, values align, and they align um, even when you don't speak the same language. Values are a language, and so I'm very humbled that I was so well received by the Korean military.
Wow. And this is another quote from General Smith. How do you plan to up your game as a role model for youth? One kind word of encouragement can change a life forever. I want girls and young women to know that, yes, they can be a leader. Use your words for good. That's a powerful quote. Thank you.
Use your words for good, and say the words you want people to repeat.
Oh my gosh. So Tracy, General Smith's wife, recounted later after a number of events that they both participated in. Tammy was talking to the students, younger students, about not allowing others to stereotype you and she gave a few examples. A 10-year-old brother of one of the students raises his hand, takes the mic, and stands up. He asked, "What if others pick on you and said you're too slow or too short or too little? What do you do?" And General Smith's response to him was so perfect that after the talk, he came up to her to ask another question and then spontaneously reached out and hugged her. That, my friends, is witness to a leader through and through.
Yeah, he was very brave to get up and ask his question.
On behalf of his bro. So after leaving the military, General Smith and Tracy Hepner have been active in LGBTQ and veteran rights events. Tracy Hepner co-founded the Military Partners and Families Coalition, which supports LGBTQ military partners and their families. Thousands and thousands of people have been damaged because their official paperwork has identified them as homosexual. But Tammy, you have told us that people can have their paperwork reviewed by the American Legion service officers now who can reverse those dishonorable discharges. So get that word out, because these people are older now. They're getting older. So talk to us about that a minute.
Yeah, there was a lot of work done after repeal in terms of changing military policy, and also I think actually a couple of laws might be behind this. And so initially, if you were discharged as a homosexual and you got less than an honorable discharge, you had to go through the entire appeals process to request a upgrade of the characterization of discharge. And so the final decision that was made is that if the reason for discharge was homosexual, then blanketly the services were going to upgrade those discharges, that you didn't need to apply for them, or if you apply, I know in the Army you don't even need to apply, but in other services, if you still need to apply, that you don't have to present all of this evidence. You don't have to do this full appeals packet. It's just it has to go through the appeals board, and that will be the authority to upgrade it back to honorable. And the reason that this is important to have that upgrade done is because you can't access any of the Veterans Administration benefits under certain characterizations of service. And you may not, from your time of service, you may not be eligible for healthcare and that sort of thing, but you are eligible for things like a Veterans Administration back home loan at a VA interest rate and some things like that. And then that, of course, becomes a valuable benefit that would be open up to you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we honor 35 years of General Smith's laudable service. Tammy, could you please tell our viewing audience how they can reach you?
Um, Probably the most direct way is to go ahead and find me on LinkedIn. And Deborah, I think I gave that to you because I'm
Yes.
Tammy Smith, so I'm hard to find just Tammy Smith
Yes.
on there. But she has the direct link, and I think she's going to post it somewhere where you got the information for this particular talk. But yeah, I would love to hear from you.
Well, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for joining us on the We Can Do It Women Show. Remember, I see you, I value you, and your greatest chapter is just beginning. If today's episode sparks something in you, I invite you to join our vibrant Facebook community, We Can Do It Women, via the link in the description below. Until next time, this is Debra Morrison reminding you that it's never too late to shine, and pay attention to your money and it will surely pay you back. Good day.
Thank you. Nice chatting with everyone.
Thank you.